So I'd like to start today with a little bit of a story. A few years ago, carbon nanotubes were all the rage, and many scientists all around the world were compiling research paper after research paper after... Yeah, it got pretty boring. To speed up the process, authors shortened the word nanotubes down to just NT, which was fine before the Chinese came along. They wanted to see if they could make nanotubes out of all sorts of different materials, and upon realising they could do this with copper, led to my new favourite Wikipedia page of all time. Anyway, on the subject of Santino Ferrucci, IndyCar was also on this weekend, and in a season so front-loaded with road and street courses, it's nice to finally be back at an oval in 2024. The Iowa doubleheader marks the first time IndyCars have literally driven round in circles since the 500 back at the end of May, with that quickly devolving into a hot pile of... Actually, I can't swear in the first 2 minutes, can I? A hot pile of Devlin DiFrancesco. Point is, this was set up to be utter chaos, so remember to hit that subscribe button to help the channel grow, and with that, let's get into the comedy review. Now roll that title card. One thing that I've somehow completely forgot to mention in this series so far is the announcement that a few weeks back, the championship signed a deal with Fox to be the sole TV distributor in the US from 2025. That makes this current intro music the only thing to have aged well on this channel in the 5 years I've been screaming deep into the void. Along with that comes many changes to the production. For instance, next year, the moment something exciting is about to happen on track, we'll cut to some hillbilly getting drunk in the crowd. And we'll also say goodbye to some members of the presenting team. Us lot in the UK will probably have to keep Tom Gaymore though. This weekend will mark Lee Diffey's final commentary on the sport, after over 10 years in the role for NBC. His screams over the slightest hint of action will be greatly missed, and I just want to take the time to say, Lee, thank you. Sorry, he's not died, has he? With there being bugger all else news heading into this weekend, let's jump straight into the singular practice session. Or actually, the practice session for the practice session. Sure. Whatever. This was meant to rubber in the track ahead of the weekend, though that didn't stop Scott McLaughlin stalking new McLaren signing Lundgaard like a pedo in a sweet shop. Marcus Ericsson had a slightly different target in mind, that being the outside wall, as he wiped the 28 car out of practice in what is starting to look like a bit of a trend for the oval rounds this year. As the Grosjean curse continue to linger on at Andretti, let's check in on the genuine article.
Yeah, we messed up on timing, I don't know. Happy then, no worries. Well, I'm worried, man, because the car is always...
Nothing new there then. Now it will be another weekend and yet another driver occupying the 51 machine at Dale Coyne Racing. This week's sacrifice would be Katherine Legge again, who has seemed to confuse IndyCar with Formula Drift. That would be the first of several close calls throughout the session, Ferrucci unfortunately just keeping it out of the wall, whilst Canapino got too preoccupied with the NBC team sucking him off and went around in the closing stages, only to then encounter Joe Biden on pit road. Scott McLaughlin would have a moment of his own, but still did enough to top the session ahead of Palou and O'Ward. Penske had been quick at the speedway in the past, but now we were gearing up for qualifying, and those lap times were really about to count. This session would work slightly differently to the standard oval setup, with drivers doing 2 laps, one setting the grid for race 1, and the other setting the grid for race 2. Cars only get one shot, however, and if something goes wrong on their quali run, they cannot go again under any circumstances. Really hope that sentence doesn't age badly in about a minute's time. Anyway, quali would kick off with Christian Rasmussen almost binning it on his opening lap. No, wait, this is actually Ed Carpenter doing an impression of Christian Rasmussen. Canapino decided that he would take inspiration from this on his attempt, though still managed to set an average speed which mixed him up with the mid-pack. Not sure if the NBC team could tell you that, as they'd already climaxed over their electronic timing screens. We would get more scares as quali dragged on, but this would be the least of the issues for Dale Coyne's Jack Harvey, the Brit dealing with neck pain from carrying the team all year so far. His life was made even worse by his hybrid system going on strike as he attempted to qualify, forcing him to gingerly get back into the car and go again, which honestly looked a bit more like a Middle Ages execution at this point. Colton Herta was running into similar problems, but despite his Andretti not firing on all cylinders, still set speeds good enough for pole in race 1 and 4th in race 2. Those hybrid issues meant he could technically run again, however, because at this stage the IndyCar rulebook had been misplaced somewhere in Roger Penske's prostate or something. The risk was, if Herta committed to running again, his original lap times would be deleted. With a P1 and 4 locked in during a highly competitive session, most people would just take that and go home. So why the f are you going again, Colton? Thankfully, the Andretti team soon saw sense and pulled the 26 car out of the fast lane. Herta celebrating alongside race 2 pole sitter Scott McLaughlin, even though Jack Harvey was back out for a third painstaking attempt because of reasons. Realistically, it would be a miracle if the Brit broke into the top 15 though. In all seriousness, Harvey didn't look well at all after this, and many were calling for him to be rested for the races. IndyCar reserve driver Connor Daly stepped in instead. The experienced American was barred from entering race 1, however, as according to IndyCar, he didn't have enough experience. Because yeah, that makes a ton of f***ing sense, doesn't it? That meant the injured Harvey lined up on the grid as the green flag fell for race 1 at Iowa. For about 5 seconds. The two Juncos cars came together and wiped each other out of the race, which I'm sure will be sad for all the masses of Juncos fans. While Lundgaard just decided that he wanted to be a backmarker for this one as he spun on his own at the back of the pack. David Malukas was caught running away from the AMR safety team in the aftermath, potentially because he was the one who had channeled his inner Blomqvist and spun at the first corner, kicking this whole drama off. After about 20 laps under yellow, we'd tried to go racing once again, Herta holding the lead while the Ferret picked up a drive-through penalty for getting too eager on the throttle. This was a questionable one for sure, but the guy's an arsehole, so who really cares? The early portion of the race didn't see a whole lot of action, as Ed Carpenter continued to make us wonder if Rasmussen was in that car after all. We'd then get another caution on lap 81 as Rahaal's front right tyre was so bored it offed itself and took the 15 car out of the running. With the yellows out, the field were retracted into pit road, where Herta would satisfy his fetish of losing the lead when McLaughlin passed him on the exit. The 33s led the field away then, despite an attempt from Herta to shoot one down the inside. While this failed, not all was lost however, and the Andretti boys hoped to get back into the lead through excellent strategy. With 80 laps under green, the 26 came to pit road, confident on fuel to go to the end of the race. The only thing that could possibly undo him here was a yellow at this exact moment, and the chances of that were very likely, as it turned out. Alex Palou had been trying to recover from a stall in his pit box earlier in the race, and had thus been making a mark by slicing through the IndyCar field. He then made a mark on the wall by hitting it rather hard. So as Herta beat himself to death on his own steering wheel, the other drivers were benefiting from some of the newly added chaos. Joseph Newgarden jumping up to 4th after a nightmare quali run earlier in the day left him fighting with IndyCar's dementia patients. He would be behind the now leading trio of McLaughlin, O'Ward and Dixon as we got going for the final 60 laps of this one, or until someone else brings out the yellows. That someone else would be Linus Tech Tips here, who had to call customer support when his Honda engine shut down with 40 tours still to run. 9 of those would be spent behind the pace car, and when it came in, we looked close to further drama, as 2 cars got very close together, and one of them was Santino Ferrucci. While the pair somehow survived, the same couldn't be said for Ganassi's Marcus Armstrong, who was shown the black flag when his car attempted to distract those behind with a light show on his rear wing. Guess we can add LEDs next to rain in things oval racers will piss themselves over now. Perhaps the bigger danger out there to everyone was Colton Herta, whose miserable day continued when he couldn't even wipe himself out of the race properly. That gave us another long period under caution, which clearly wasn't long enough as Will Power sacrificed Fittipaldi in protest, the Brazilian collecting Ed Carpenter, which to be fair probably did do the rest of the field a favour. We'd go green then for the last handful of laps, Ferrucci using the restart to cut through the pack like he'd turned all the AI difficulty to 0. Unfortunately, he'd end up having a decent race, finishing 6th as up at the front, Penske's Scott McLaughlin crossed the line to take his very first oval win from O'Ward and Joseph Newgarden. We're not done yet though, as in less than 24 hours we'd be attempting this again. And thankfully, IndyCar was thinking about my man hours in this one, as race 2 was about as dull as one of those plastic knives that breaks off in your food and slices your trachea to bits. Stingray did take the Jesus car to meet God at the end though, so stay tuned for that. Race 1 winner McLaughlin would be on pole for this one, with Dixon having a look on the inside of Palou as we attempted another 250 laps of this short Ira oval. The first 100 of which were boring as so here's the race leaders coming in for their first pit stops. McLaughlin chose to pit alongside Herta, which was a stupid call on strategies. The 3 car therefore picked up some of Colton's luck this weekend, emerging onto the racetrack just as Canapino had his Canapino moment and stalled the car on the apron. That would cycle Palou and Power up to the front as we got going again on lap 114, McLaughlin battling through the lap runners, Ferrucci and Kirkwood trying to kill each other again, and Newgarden becoming the first driver in history to go side by side with Grosjean and live to tell the tale. The next 80 laps were boring as again, so much so that Felix Rosenqvist fell asleep and ran himself into the wall. Somewhere in those last 80 laps, Power had managed to pass Palou to take the lead, I don't know exactly how or where, because the extended highlights decided this wasn't a key moment in the race, nor were the last 20 laps when he defended from the championship leader. He made about as much effort to attack as I have spent on this last third of the video. Power would cross the line then in P1, but we weren't quite done just yet. A massive thank you to Stingray Rob, who really knows the YouTube algorithm and decided to launch himself skywards on the final lap to help boost this video's watch time. The cars behind attempted to avoid the incident, which ironically created another incident in itself, ending in Carl Kirkwood being bitch-slapped by Ed Carpenter's rear tyre. In all seriousness, I'm glad everyone's okay after this one. Stingray in particular, who had to be airlifted to hospital for precautionary checks. That incident, though, made what was otherwise a fairly uneventful race at least somewhat memorable, and drivers have since come out in protest of the racing, Alex Palou claiming it was one of the most boring things he's ever done. And that's quite considerable, coming from a man who has spent time in the F1 paddock, where you could find yourself conversing with Lance f***ing Stroll. I've also just remembered that Daly did sit in for Harvey for race 2, though made bugger all of an impression on this one, hence why I forgot. Here's hoping that Jack's neck is clear for IndyCar's next stop in Toronto next week. Expect that video to be fairly delayed, as I'll be in Budapest this weekend for the Formula 1 action. If you want to follow through my adventures in the meantime though, you can check out all of my social media links down in the description below. While you're down there, make sure to get sub to the channel for weekly posting, and the final thank you of course goes out to all the patrons and channel members who help get me closer and closer to making this what I do for a living. All those links are down below as well if you want to get involved in that. But for now, that's all from me, so I'll see you very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.